Today in this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to make chainmail, and specifically the European 4-to-1 pattern, such as these examples here. This is the pattern that is the building blocks of what you would traditionally think of when you think chainmail. It's called European 4-to-1 because it originated from Europe, where it was originally used for armor. And if you take a closer look here, each ring basically passes through 4 other rings. So that's where the 4-to-1 comes from. The examples that I have here are made out of 1/4 inch rings. These are 18 gauge and these are 17 gauge. The larger gauge, remember 17 gauge is actually a larger wire diameter than 18 gauge, so it's a bit confusing that way. I get confused sometimes too. But anyway, the bigger wire, so the smaller the smaller the number of the gauge will actually give you a tighter weave. As you can see here, this is a bit tighter and this is a little bit looser, so different kind of properties of the ring will give you different results. These examples here, with the exception of this little guy, are made from 5/16 of an inch rings. This is sort of the size you would want to start off with if you're making any kind of body armor, vest, headpiece, something like that, because using a smaller size will just take you way longer. And this tiny piece of chainmail here is actually made from 1/8 of an inch 20 gauge rings. So you can make this pattern in a variety of sizes of rings for a variety of different end results. Today, I'm going to be using 1/4 inch 16 gauge rings. These are anodized aluminum. I have 2 colors here, and I'm hoping that by having the 2 different colors, it'll make this video a little bit easier to follow along. I'm also using 2 pairs of jewelry pliers, and the big difference is they don't have teeth, so they won't damage the rings as much as other pliers would. Now, when you first have a ring in its raw form, as you can hopefully see here, it is neither open or closed. And the reason for that is because the rings are cut from coils of wire, so they're coiled like this, and the result is there's a slight offset in the ends. So I'm going to be talking when working with these rings about closing or opening the rings. Now, if I open a ring, I simply make it large enough to put other rings on it. And if I close a ring, I just close the ring. The important thing is when you're closing a ring, you might need to kind of open it a little bit more and then close it, because there will be a slight gap that you want to try to eliminate between the ends as a result of the process of making the rings, where there's a tiny saw that cuts through there. So you're basically just going to close the ring to compensate for the material that the saw removes when it cuts the coil of wire into separate rings. So anyway, I'm going to start off by closing 4 rings, and again, that's because we're doing the European 4-to-1, so each ring will pass through 4 rings. And I'm going to be closing black rings and opening blue rings so you can sort of visualize things a little bit better. So I've closed 4 black rings, I'm going to open 1 blue ring, put the 4 black rings on it, and then close it. Okay, now we have our basic unit of chainmail here. It's 1 ring that has 4 rings going through it. Now, when you're working with chainmail, it's really important to kind of get an understanding of how the rings can lie or orient themselves in a pattern. So for example, you can look at this unit here, and you can see how this ring can flip over or it can kind of move over. So we want to make sure that the rings are flipped over and lying like this before we start. Now, this is a hard thing to kind of explain. It's something that you will just learn and hopefully learn by watching me do it. So you take this, you have it all jumbled around, and sort of play with the rings until they're lying like this. Once you've got the rings looking like this, you're going to need to close 2 more rings. Again, I'm going to close the black ones, and I'm going to open 1 ring and put the 2 closed rings on it. Now we're ready to add this to this, and we're going to do it in a way that continues the pattern of the way the rings are lying right now, and also holds the rings that we add it to in place. So we're going to be adding it to these two rings here, these two black rings closest to us, and we're going to do it in a way that basically follows the pattern of this center ring. So I'm going to go down through this ring and then up through this ring. And if I happen to have the pattern flipped around looking like this, then I would need to go up through this ring and down through this ring. You can do it either way. The difference is simply the direction that this center ring is lying. You can see that when it's this way, it's going up, so its top is here and its bottom is here. And if it's flipped, then we're going to be working with the top side instead of the bottom side. So that being said, I'm going to put some pressure on it just to keep the rings from moving, and unfortunately it conceals the view a little bit, but I'm going to go down through this first black ring and up through this second black ring, just like I described. And you can see by doing that, now when I tug on these rings, they're held in place. Now I'll show you a really common mistake a lot of people make is if they don't have the rings lying properly, then you can go through like this, or if you don't go through the right way, if you go up first and then when you pull, it's just gonna form a chain basically. And even though we're making chain mail, we're not making a chain. So you're gonna flip the rings over, you're gonna go down and then up instead of going up and then down and making that chain. Okay, so we've talked about it enough. Let's actually do something here. So we have the top facing us, down through the closest one to me, up through the furthest away one. Now I'm going to close that ring. All right, so that's basically it. That's how you make chainmail. So we're going to keep adding to this piece of chainmail here. So as we go along, we're also going to make sure the rings are lying properly. That means that in this case, I'm going to have to flip this one over, and you can see that all the rings are kind of lying in the right direction, which is exactly what we're looking for. So I'm going to close two more rings, open one, then add that to it as well, and just continue doing that. Okay, and again, flip the top one so it's all lying nicely, and add another segment. Now, a great way to speed up the process is to close a bunch of rings and open a bunch of rings at time, and then kind of add to the chain in bulk. So I'm going to close a bunch of black rings, and you're going to need 2 closed ring for every open ring. So I like to count it out. I'm going to close 10 blacks and then open 5 blues and then add them all to the chain. All right, so that's really all there is to this pattern. I have a nice little section of chainmail made up now, and you can see that the ends, the rings are not held in place, so they'll flip around and stuff. It's important to just remember that if you are gonna add to it, it really comes down to one thing, and that's having the rings lying properly. So the process of making chainmail itself in the European 4-to-1 pattern is quite straightforward, but there are a few other things that are useful to know. For example, how to attach 2 pieces of chain together. So if you are ever making any kind of clothing or anything like that, you'll probably encounter this where you definitely will encounter this, where you have a few different pieces of chain and you have to start stitching them together. So there's really 2 ways to attach 2 pieces of chainmail chain. The first is going to be attaching one to the other that way, and the second is to attach one to the other width way, I guess. So I'm going to show you this one first. Really all you have to do, like I said before, it's all just about making sure the ends line up properly and then continuing the center pattern. So I've got it lined up properly here. You can see that on the pattern on this side, each of the rings on the bottom has its top to the left and then it's bottom to the right. So they're lying like one over the other, kind of like scales like that. And in the center, they go the opposite direction. So they're scaling this way. Now I just make sure that both pieces are the same. So if they're rotated, they're not. They're looking at each other. The two scale directions are facing each other, and that won't work. So we're just gonna get them lying the right way, make sure that, you know, the ends are not like this, that they're lying nice and flat. Then we're gonna push them over top of each other and come in with an open ring and go down through that one, down through the next one on the other side, and then up through the ones on the top side. So you're basically just putting it in place in a way that continues the pattern. As simple as that. All right, up next, I'm gonna show you how to attach two pieces of chain in this configuration. So I have my second piece of chain here, and they're both the exact same length. They're 20 units long, and I'm gonna line them up. Again, as you can probably expect by now, I'm gonna make sure that the patterns are going the right direction. So if I look at the ends, I can see very clearly that both of these rings are lying so that their top is above this ring. So if I were to place this as such, you can see that is not the case anymore. This ring is on top of this ring, and this ring is on top of this ring. Not what we're looking for. Get them lined up and then simply start from one end. I'll start at this end because this end is the top of the center rings. They are lying in such a way that their top is up here, so that way I'm working down as I move along, if that makes sense. Going down through this one, down through this one, up through this one, up through this one, and then move that along. So down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up, and so forth until the entire chain is connected. And I'm just gonna reposition these so that they're facing me. You wanna make sure you're in a position that's easy to work, and down, down, up, up, and close. Okay, so you can pull that tight and see that it's lining up with the direction the rings are running all around it, and it's through 4 rings in accordance with the 4-to-1 nature of this pattern. So once again, down, down, up, up, close. Oh, popped out there. There we go. I'm trying to do this in a way that you guys can maybe see what's going on. It's usually I would kind of hold this piece as I work with it, and I find that's a lot easier because it's easier to kind of keep the rings where you want them if you're holding them. All right, now in the interest of seeing something get made, since we're already almost there, I'm gonna continue this pattern and finish it off and actually use some rubber O-rings on the last part of it that'll allow it to stretch over the user and become something of a cuff bracelet. So I'll just let the camera roll and you guys can see the process of this turning into jewelry. All right, there it is. That's the cuff bracelet that I made today. And as you can see, due to this section here with the the neoprene rings, it'll actually stretch, so it'll slip on and off and still remain tight when somebody's wearing it. Thanks for watching this video, and make sure you take the time to subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. I have a lot of other videos and projects coming out soon.